Welcome to the Workforce Connections podcast, where we discuss workforce development in Southern Nevada. Here's your host.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the WC podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. We've been looking forward to her visit. This is my peer from Eugene, from Lane County, Oregon, Ashley Espinoza, who is the Executive Director of Lane Workforce Partnership and my fellow member of the U.S. Conference of Mayors Workforce Development Council. Ashley, welcome to Las Vegas, Southern Nevada, and welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jaime, for having me. I've already enjoyed my time here so much. And we are laughing today because it's raining here in Las Vegas this morning. So I brought my Oregon weather.
You sure did. You sure did. Yeah. So to get started in our podcast, Ashley, we want our listeners, our audience, to get to know you a little bit. So take us through a quick journey. Tell us where you were born and raised, when you went to school, college. Take us to maybe your first job out of college.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I hope you don't feel like I got you, Jaime, but I did want this to be pretty organic in the sense that I actually didn't go to college. So I dropped out of high school my sophomore year and ended up getting my GED. So I always describe my journey like a master class in on-the-job training.
Yeah.
And if I now look at kind of the sequence of like my LinkedIn history, which it's really nice visually to see, it's like, okay, it doesn't make sense, but if you like look beyond kind of the roles, it makes a lot of sense because it's all about community and, you know, bringing people together, being strategic, public relations, all of those things. So anyway, so I just want tempering expectations. I actually did not go to college, but I'm first generation Latina. Both of my parents are from Sinaloa, Mexico. I was born in San Diego, and my family moved us. I won't tell everyone the story how, but in 1989, my parents decided to move the family to a town of 5,000 in Oregon, which is just about 9 miles south of Eugene, Oregon. So that's where I serve and still live now. The workforce board that I work for is the entire county. So I actually serve the city that I grew up into.
Nice.
So, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, grew up in this small town, Junction City, less than 5,000 people. Very little diversity still. We have a community that's, if you look, it's 88% white. And then you have, the other splits are really actually very uneven, and there's a lot of reasons for that too, and mostly agriculture things.
No, it's good.
No,
you are the story again
yeah.
that we always talk about in workforce development, that the post-secondary skill acquisition journey is not always through college,
yeah.
right? In your case, it was on-the-job learning, as you say, and you're going to tell us a little about that next. But sometimes it's vocational training, sometimes it's apprenticeship, it's all kinds of things, right? So I'm glad to be learning that about you too. I didn't even know that you had done most of your skill acquisition through just on-the-job training. So.
Yeah. And I think it's just, every family has different culture, kind of different values. And I feel like those values are based on kind of your lived experience. And again, like full circle, the work that we do every day when we're asked to kind of like put ourselves in our customers' shoes, it's like I checked all those boxes. So again, long story short, rural community in Oregon, very, very low diversity. And it created the salmon in the pond that I was in. When I would go home, it was a very Mexican household. And the minute I stepped out of my door, it was the Scandinavian festival, literally. I danced in it since I was 3 years old.
Wow.
As a Latina, like my dad doesn't even speak English very well, so I grew up there. I had some issues, I think, within like the adolescent age, around 14, 15, trying to figure out who you are. I did play sports, those things. And it got to a point where I ended up dropping out, but only because I think it was accepted in my family. Because my son, I have an 18-year-old, he's graduating this year, and he'll be first generation high school graduate still. So like I'm saying, like there's probably, I sometimes have shame around my backstory, but I bet you there's so many other families, there's so many other people that have that journey, and it could be for so many different reasons. And what I've come to realize, it actually doesn't matter the reason, it's how do you move forward? And so through all of that, I think that I, had to grind it out. I had to do I had to do work that maybe wasn't, like restaurants, hospitality, but I was learning things that I didn't know what I was learning, and so eventually I actually, again, fast forward, I end up living in Mexico for a while, working in timeshare. So talk about, kind of like the first job. So that journey took me to, growing up in a really small town, being first generation Latina, my family not really, being able to feel a sense of belonging. And then myself dropping out, not really knowing what I'm going to do, go to Mexico, start working in timeshare and realize that I'm really good at talking to people. So that really actually like spurred this idea that I can work with, I was working at 16 years old, I was working with adults 3 times my age. And we were peers at that point. And so I think that just really empowered me to say, I can do these things. But I didn't necessarily tell people my backstory. Yeah. I just let people assume. Always. Yeah. Just let people assume.
So let's fill that gap then, because now, of course, take us a little bit more through those milestones in your professional journey. Tell us about that on-the-job training, because now you are the executive director of the board for Lane County. It serves that whole, not just Eugene, but all the other cities in Lane County. How did you get there? What was, I know that you came into the board in other positions, but even before the board, what was that journey like?
Yeah, so I ended up, living in Mexico. I was young, and at the age of 19, I got pregnant with my son, Aiden. He's 18 now. And it just wasn't the same. Believe it or not, Mexico's not the same when you're, in your head, like, because I was born and raised in the United States. So, pretty, I'm an American in a Mexican country. And so we ended up moving back to the United States, and it was in 2008 when the recession hit. Wow. And so his dad at the time, because he's from Mexico, just couldn't find a job because he didn't speak English. And so I actually went to the Workforce Center. And I didn't think about that until after working for the board for a while. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so weird. That's how it started. So I went to the Workforce Center, did all of the things. And it was between Enterprise Car Rental and State Farm. And so I interviewed for both, and the State Farm, and I was just telling a friend of mine this story. When I got there, it was a family-owned business, because State Farm agencies are small businesses, right? And so they were brothers. So the agent was the older brother and then the younger brother. And if you could imagine when they're kind of together, the dynamic. So I get into the interview, and the brother's in the front, and he's like, how are things going? And I'm like, I'm just a little nervous. And, he's like, just tell him you know everything, and I'll show you how to do anything. Like, you'll be able to figure it out. And so that in my head gave me an understanding, like, again, people are willing to help me. People are willing to support me. People see something in me without me having to prove that yet. So then I was like, this is a nice environment. So I chose to work there, even though I probably could have made more money, because I have a 1-year-old at this time, right? And so then I think that was the best on the job training, because it was a small business. I couldn't even put a stamp crooked, because my boss would be like, I still call him boss, by the way, because he just was so good at get on time, do everything perfect, do everything to the best of your ability. Not necessarily perfect, but your best. And I feel like for that to be ingrained in me, and then I got my property and casualty licenses and life and health eventually, then started getting into community engagement, because I was a bilingual insurance person. Not a lot of people did that, especially in such a diverse place like Las Vegas. It's maybe hard to imagine, but there it's nobody spoke Spanish. Wow. So people started to get to know me. I started a networking group called Latino Professionals Connect, which started in 2016, and that was a professionals group too. I know we're out here. There's 11% of us, so I know by percent it doesn't sound like a lot, but I know by numbers. So we started this group. And it went really well, and I ended up getting an award through the United Way for Volunteer of the Year. And that just started piquing a lot of people's interest. And so people started coming to the networking group. People started inviting me to serve on boards. People started, having those things. And so this job came up of a sector strategy director with the board, which I didn't even know what a workforce board was at all. And so someone sent it to me and I'm like, I don't even qualify. Like, I was working at State Farm, at the time. This was in, 2017 at this point. But something in me just said, just go for it. Like, you are doing all these things. You did get that award. Like, why not? So I did. And I met my predecessor, which now, Christina Payne, and she on the job training, let's talk about how she did, but, just really took on to me. And it was pretty competitive, the role, because they pay well and we treat our people well. And we're the example of what workforce should look like and how people engage within workforce. And so I loved all of that. And so there was competitive, and she was like, it might be a few weeks or whatever. And she called me back in 3 days and she's like, I can't stop thinking about you. Like, I think you're perfect. And so I started working. I started as the sector strategy director, and I feel like Lane County, and if you look kind of at our website, at laneworkforce.org, you can kind of track back, because we do a state of the workforce every 2 years of like our sector work from like 2016 to now, and like the evolution. So it's a really proud point to know that although we've moved away from that position at the board level, a lot of that work was seeded through that position, because I was in that position for 3 years, and now I've been in my position for another 3. Oh. So that is the journey, Jaime.
That's a great journey. So I wanted to clear for our audience that as they heard you talk about the Workforce Center, that's the brand in Oregon of the American Job Centers, Workforce Center.
Yes.
And for us here, they're called Employ-NV hubs, whether they're a business hub, which are for businesses, a career hub, or a youth hub for job seekers. Again, Workforce Centers, American Job Centers in Oregon. So thanks for sharing that journey. I want to kind of now focus on, like you said, your workforce board, the Lane County Workforce Board. Tell us about some of the innovative things that you're doing. Because again, one of the things I enjoy about always meeting with my peers is learning from each other, right? Sharing best practices. So tell us a couple of the things that you're very proud of that's happening there at your board.
I think foundationally, I'll start with, and now we're just learning with kind of just how everything's happening with like funding and all this, that we, for sustainability for the last, I think, again, like once we started working with industry through sector strategy, I think the board, you have to have accountability, right? Somebody is now holding you accountable because they're investing 50%. Like, we're putting our part, you all have to put your part. So I feel like we got trained as a board and as staff to be multi-purpose. So everything I share to you, like, yes, it does this, but actually we are retrofitting and reinforcing and rebuilding systems and structures while we're implementing programs, which is so cool. So for example, when we have devastating wildfires in the state of Oregon, at the time there was still conversations about, students don't get exposed to the trades, and, they're learning to do the trades through VR because it was like after the pandemic and all of those things. And so there was this idea through industry had talked about it for years, but why aren't we using the youth to support like community needs? And so they started building sheds for fire victims. And then from there, they wanted more exposure. So then we started building tiny homes for safe sleep sites for the unhoused. And if you think of the multi-purpose there, the safe sleep sites don't have to spend money on the structure, so they can use that money for other things. The instructors are doing something that people want to learn, and that they're actually showing off their skills to people. The students are not only doing it because they want to go in the trades, but they want to help the unhoused. So they're doing it, and now they're getting exposed. And then girls are like, because they wanted to work with the unhoused, they're like, I want to now be an architect. I want to be an engineer. Like, I want to do these things, you're starting to see. And so there's just a lot of cool things that from the tiny house project, and then a really good way to wrap in community and industry, because people are really excited about. So that's constructing a brighter future. And so that's one of the programs. I think the other one, because Oregon made a really big investment a few years ago in workforce, $220 million. The workforce boards didn't get all that money. But because of the community we live in, I only have one community college for the whole.
A big one.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, it's a big one, but it's one, and we don't. They consider us like a training desert, and so we had to get creative and talking about sector strategy, working with industry. It's really easy to not easy, but we activate partnerships pretty quickly. We did customized training for CDL drivers, and so what we would do is the employer would hire. Then they would train them on the job, get their CDL, and then move them into those positions. And they actually prefer it that way because they didn't have to undo what the training school did for them. Because the training school only teaches you, at least in Oregon, my understanding is just to pass the test. When you're getting taught on the job, you're getting taught to pass the test through applied learning of what it's actually like to be on the job. Right. So you're right out the bat getting really good. And the businesses are like, you're great. You guys are paying for the training the training. We're paying for the wages. So everybody's kind of like a win-win. So it's like quasi apprenticeship. So it's a customized training program is what we call it.
Yeah. Or it's kind of learning on the job, as you said. And it's interesting because in rural places, that's almost like you need to come together because there's less resources, and each institution, the larger the cities, the larger the board is, the larger the budget of the board. But in places that are smaller, as you said, that's the only way to really be innovative and get change is if you can align partners like the ones you just described. So now talking about partnerships, one of the things I know that last time we saw each other was here in Las Vegas because you attended the September fall meeting for the U.S. Conference of Mayors Workforce Development Council. It was hosted by the City of Las Vegas and Mayor Carolyn Goodman. And we had 70 of our peers actually here in town. We had a good time over 2.5 days, I think. But I remember that it was very impactful for you. It was your first meeting. And now I've heard you say, you want to come back because it was great for you also, again, to meet new peers and to be able to exchange, have this platform to exchange best practices. Tell me a little bit about what that meeting meant to you. What did you take away from that meeting back in the fall of September of last year?
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you for inviting me because until after I realized the hospitality that you all gave to just include me in it was amazing. Can I go back just a little bit as to why this particularly was really important to me? We as in the city of Eugene was in a transition for mayors. And so I've always had a really great relationship with our current mayor, or excuse me, not now current mayor, our past mayor, and I also know our current mayor because she's an architect, because she was working for affordable and workforce housing and things like that. But I knew that the transition was going to happen. And I've always heard about the U.S. Conference of Mayors, but I didn't really know. So then when the opportunity came up and knowing that they were going to be a new mayor, and so I thought opportunistically, this is a good way to introduce right out the bat, this opportunity. So it was amazing. I got to see Shelly from WorkSource Central, which I love, from Tacoma, Washington, and Katie. I got to see a lot of people that I have met, in spaces, and like you said, other people that I have not had the opportunity to meet. So that was cool. I got to see you really shine in your community and bring your partners in, and really show us what partnership can look like, and you all really setting yourselves up to show us the best example of what it can be. So that was really neat. And then of course, the tours, because again, I don't know, maybe you're going to think that I'm copying you, but, Hope for Prisoners or the co-location, all of those things are the things that we've been working on in Oregon. And so over there, it's just a dream. Over there, it's just a vision. And we're implementing, but it's if it's working or it's not, I want to know both.
That's right.
I want to know both.
I think that's the benefit of this peer exchange. I think I told you the story 12, 13 years ago when I first started to do, I think, this kind of work. I joined the board almost 17 years ago now, but I think 13 years ago I started to do sector strategies, as you were describing. And I started to travel across the nation again to learn from our peers. And that for me has always been my favorite thing. And so we all copy, if you will, replicate, duplicate, scale up the good work that's happening elsewhere. And hopefully, as you said too, just like we like to scale up what's working, with our peers' permission, we also learn about what not to do so that we don't make the same mistake. So
those are my actually favorite.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So another thing that we talk about a lot among our peers, Ashley, as you know, especially now, we've been on calls. It's the topic of all our conferences is, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act is now almost, I think, 4 or 5 years due renewal or reauthorization is the correct term. And we know that the Workforce Investment Act before that went almost 10 years without being reauthorized. It eventually did with WIOA, the WIOA. But now, there's been, last year, there was the Stronger Workforce for America, or OSWA, that passed the House, but not the Senate. And then it came close through the passing of a continual resolution, or a CR, in December at the 11th hour, but it didn't make it. And in a way, many boards are happy it didn't make it because it had some good things in the reauthorization. It also had some things that were troublesome for the local mayors, which is why the U.S. Conference of Mayors, National Leagues of Cities, National Association of Counties all came together and said there are things that need to be fixed there. So it's going to be, I think, continue to be a hot topic over the next few weeks, months, who knows how long it will take. What kind of challenges and opportunities do you see in our workforce development world ecosystem here over the next few months, years?
I think because I'm a product of the system, I feel like it's frustrating to be working in the system as a product of the system, and knowing that we're in a space of having to qualify people in certain rigid ways before they even get the support that they need, versus let's give people the support that they need, and then let's envision together what that future looks like. So I feel like we're even approaching the work actually really unfortunate. And again, maybe I take it personally because I'm a product of the system. And then the other thing that I think that it's really interesting about all of this is we in Lane County were part of a partnership with two other of the workforce boards, and we were a Good Jobs Challenge recipient. And what was really fascinating is that when the Good Jobs Challenge ended, a lot of these conversations started. I was literally in a room in DC 1 minute, and it was talking about, with Good Jobs Challenge, holistic support, rent, getting people across the finish line. And yeah, training was like a little piece of it, but really employers are figuring it out on their own. So that's why we partner with businesses now, because it's like, let's not compete against each other. So like all of these like dynamics are happening in like these in these really interesting ways. So then when you're talking about these things in this room, that it's like super important to have the flexible, holistic support. And then you step over here and then you're like 50%. And actually, if you're under a certain amount, you may just be your governor gets all of this, and it's like, I know that we implement things in Lane County very differently than my peers across the state, because we listen and we are a reflection of our local economy. Right. So it's really unfortunate, and it scares me to think that, and if Andrew's listening, which he has, Andrew McGaw is one of the 9 workforce board directors.
Our peer from Portland.
And you have another peer that actually was here, Heather Desart.
Heather, yes, from the coast.
But if you hear, and I'm not saying it to critique him, it's his region, it's the largest, but everybody's like, Oregon, nobody cares about anything other than Portland. And so I can't even imagine if this happens, like that's just doubling, tripling down, because if we're working so hard and people still feel that way, what's going to happen when it actually happens?
Yeah,
scary.
I think this is a big reason why the system was built, to be regional, right? Mm-hmm. They're called local boards for a reason, not state boards. And so, there's a reason, I think, why Portland is very unique. It needs to be served a different way than Lane County or the other areas of of Oregon. But also here, states are very different. California, for example, has 46 local boards because they have almost 46 different micro economies, and the industrial valley, the agricultural valley, Silicon Valley. And here in Nevada, even though we're a large state geographically with 17 counties and almost 4 million people now across the state, we are still a small state in many other ways. So we have 2 local boards. Us here at Workforce Connections, who does the 4 southernmost counties. And then, of course, Nevada Works, who you're going to meet later, my peer Milt, who does the other 13 counties to the north. So another thing I wanted to talk to you about was, I'm going to brag about you a little bit now, because you've received multiple awards. You mentioned one earlier throughout your career. I'm going to mention the last two. In 2022, you received the Community Leadership Award from the City of Eugene Human Rights Commission. And then, of course, this year, very recently, you are part of a group that received the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals, or NADAP as we call it, their Workforce Program of the Year. It was awarded to Team Oregon Build. And you were talking again about your peers in Oregon. First of all, congratulations to you and your peers about this recognition, because I think it's really cool when states can collaborate. You guys happen to have a state association, which is the Oregon Workforce Partnership. Not every state has it. Again, here in Nevada, I have a great relationship with my peer, and I guess whenever we're on the phone or together, officially our state partnership is activated, but we don't have an official association. Texas does, Florida does, you guys do too. And I think this is, for me, encouraging to see how despite the differences in regions and personalities and economies, still there's a way for boards to work together, do work that gets recognized, like in this case, Team Oregon Build. So tell us what this recognition meant to you personally, and what is it like, again, being able to overcome the barriers of geographies and still collaborate with your partner boards?
Yeah, and I guess that's the other thing too, is like that's where the localization again is so important, because yes, we have an association, but it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz right now. Like, yet we're all like scrapping together. Like, if you're the chair, your CFO's or the treasurer, your CFO's the treasurer. So yes, association that we have a space to collaborate, but it's not necessarily the space that activated this program. And so to my earlier innovative program of the sheds to constructing a brighter future for the houses, people are like, we want this. Like, why can't we have this in other regions? And it's like, well, you can, but you can't. I call it a Pinterest fail. You cannot just think that you can add different ingredients, you can do a little bit of less of this and maybe a little bit more of that, and that you're going to get the same thing you saw on Pinterest. It's going to be a Cinderella that's lopsided. So we had to, as our board, so my local board, Lane Workforce Partnership, so Jesse Quinn, Luke with us. We had got an intern from the University of Oregon that we ended up hiring. Pivot Architecture, which is our industry champion. Our Lane Education Service District, which supports all of our like more rural communities of the 16 districts in Lane County. All of us, we went on a road show and we went to communities and we said, before we make promises to you, you have to know what it takes. And until you guys know what it takes and you're willing to commit to it, and it was like ESD peer, industry peer, workforce peer, and some said yes, and some would be like, what do you mean we're the ones that have to do the work? Yeah, you're the ones that have to do the work for right now because it's still a pilot. There's no real infrastructure. We've been having to be scrappy with money. Like, we get drops of dollars. We joke with Luke because we go to lunch every time that it's end of his like money to stay with us. And we're like, we don't know if it's a celebratory lunch because we got more money, or if it's a buy Luke lunch because we don't have more money for you. But he has like this full like Amazon like distribution. So I think that why this award is so important to myself as the executive director, but for our community, is it is a community award. And because it's like manufacturing, like you can't mess it up there's a little error, but it's a lot of moving parts between Lowe's and the school districts and the safe sleep sites. And so people have to be really serious about wanting to develop a program and have their institutions support the level of rigor that it takes to get there. So that's that program. And I feel like because it's such high rigor, it looks maybe easy. But again, to run an operation like that I would love to see somebody else try to do that. It is pretty nationally like world class potentially, and so that's that. I guess for the other award, and I appreciate you bringing that up. It's always wonderful when it has to do anything with human, because workforce is human. So if you get an award for human rights, it's like workforce rights in my head. So that was like a very special award for me. And I love that it happened in 2022 and we're in 2025, and that the next award that I was bunched with was a team award, because I'm not getting solo awards anymore. And I'm okay with that, because I'm not doing work. I'm not scrappy anymore by myself trying to figure out, how do I get to the table? How do I show myself? How do I prove myself? Which got me to a lot of places. And yeah, it's wonderful that people recognize. But I love that the next one after that was a collaboration like you cannot believe.
It sounds really good, and it sounds like something, again, other states, other regions can replicate. They just got to call you and get the recipe. So
yeah, actually, so because we do learn from other regions, we anticipated that. So what we decided was as we started building a playbook. So if you go on my website, our website, laneworkforce.org, there's this tab. There's actually the full playbook.
Great.
Yeah, and it was so much easier to do it on the front end. People do a playbook from the beginning. Don't try to do it after you're done, because you're so tired after the program's lifted. You're like, now I have to do a handbook or what, you know?
Well, that's thoughtful. I'm glad that you guys not only wrote the playbook, but are sharing it that way. So
widely. Like we're going to conferences. They're going everywhere. I mean, people, it works.
Right.
You want to hear something funny about that too, just to show like how we try to reframe and just like really squeeze the limes out of whatever we can, is that, of course, we're working with children. We're going into schools, and safety is a big thing. And so they needed to wear safety gear. But we also, and with federal dollars, we can't, some people take it more seriously than others. Not seriously, but everybody has different flexible dollars. But the point is that very conservative on buying swag. But because they need safety, they did their orange vests, their orange hat, everything with Team Oregon Build. So it's, again, multi-purpose. Not only did they have to have it anyways, but now it has the logo on all of it. So it's just those cool little things where it's like, how dimensional can we get this? How dynamic? And we're not afraid to manage that, because you do. I mean, the more dynamic you get, the more management. But if you set up systems and structures, like we said, and you anticipate and you're thoughtful and you work with good people and not dead weight a lot of times, to be honest, it's great.
That's the recipe for success. Another peer and common friend of ours is, Walter Simmons from Prince George County. He just pulled off a huge event that targeted laid off federal workers. I think he had 1,000 workers in his center. And, he's also somebody who is very generous with his best practices. I know him and I love to get together and learn from each other. I know you do as well. But I bring that up because Walter also sits, I see him always, as I will continue to see you at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Workforce Development Council, at the NOB meetings. I know there's a NOB forum coming up in D.C. But Walter also sits on the board of directors of the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals, or NADP, with Melissa over there. And I bring that up because I noticed we all got our ballots, and now I saw your name. So you're running to be on that board of directors, representing Region 6. Tell us why you decided to do that. Well,
because of folks that may be listening, you know who you are, kind of give me that nudge. But again, opportunity. I mean, I think you can take words and make it mean a lot of things. We're leaning into the word of opportunistic. We need to, because that is when you strike when the iron is hot. That's the definition of being opportunistic. And so we at Oregon Workforce Partnership, the association, one way that we are trying to establish ourselves to be not so, kind of, I wouldn't say we're emerging, right? But we took on an association that was kind of dying off, that was for workforce professionals, professional development. And so the executive director of OWP, Georgia Conrad, really took on that interest, we completely got it under OWP. And we do a conference every year. And so it's professional development, and not just for the people that get our dollars, but really for the entire, whoever considers themselves part of the public workforce system. And again, why it's so important is because your programs can only be as good as your people. And so And how do you do that? If anything, it's us that know it's through training. So where is that space? And I feel like we don't make the time for our own people. And so this is an association that does that. OWP is standing up OIDA. My staff is really involved with that. We're going to be at the conference next month in the beautiful coast of Oregon with people from all across the state learning together, getting to see executive directors of boards with someone from vocational rehab or someone from DHS, Goodwill, someone working for, just lots of different areas. And so there's just a lot of synergy, and I would just love to flow that back from like local, state, national, state, local, like whatever works, being able to have that full vantage point, I think is pretty cool.
When will we know the results of the election?
I don't know. So I guess the end of the voting, so if you did get your ballot, March 31st. Is the end for it. And then I don't know when you learn.
Okay.
June maybe.
Okay. At the next Not Up event?
Yep.
Okay.
Which is, again, we're going to be there because we're getting the award.
Yeah. And the next Not Up event is where?
It's in Virginia Beach. May Cinco de Mayo. So May 5th, 6th, and 7th.
Okay.
Yep.
And so that's going to be across the country. That's another long trip for you.
So and I talked to you about this even before coming here. I'm like, how do you balance as an executive director of traveling and working with public dollars? Did we, yes or no, have this full on conversation like a year ago? Because I'm trying to figure this out like on the fly.
Yeah.
But and so yeah, I'm traveling a lot, but again, I feel like I get a lot of value when I travel. I met you, I met Walter. We're gonna have an event next week, and our keynote is Tamar Jackson, which is the senior community engagement director with Pierce County. Pierce County.
Okay.
In Tacoma, and so he's going to come to. So I feel like I try to always again bring back value, bring back opportunities, and our team is really aligning themselves to that too. Like if we're going to go somewhere, we're going to come together and figure out like good, bad, or indifferent. We're going to like debrief. We're going to get something out of it.
Yep.
So yes, I'm going to travel a lot, but also gather hopefully really good intel.
Good. Well, enough shop talk. We've talked a lot about work. Let our audience learn a little bit more about you. I know you told us your personal story in the beginning of the podcast, but now we want to know a little bit of your life outside of work. When you're not working, doing all these great things that you just described, or maybe even volunteering in your community, like you said you do, you volunteer on boards. When you have time that's truly for you, how do you and your family enjoy that spare time? What hobbies, activities do you enjoy?
Yeah, so it's like almost like going to one of those things like, hi, my name is Ashley and I have a problem. I'm on 15 boards. And so a lot of it, again, aligns really closely to the work that we do. And like it helps, kind of help with that free flow. But yeah, I'm gone a lot. I'm attending meetings. Some are during the day, some are in the evenings, things like that. So I didn't even know this because as people could probably tell, I have a lot of energy and I'm a super extrovert. And then the pandemic hit and then I'm like, actually, I'm not. I'm an introvert too. So I think there's whatever the name for it is, but for me, I'm an introvert, extrovert. But so on my time off, I love to cook.
Oh, okay.
I love to cook.
Recipes from Sinaloa? Or?
Heck yeah. Wow. So like seafood, like ceviche, albóndigas, pozole, birria. I love making all my different salsas, all these things. And so what I would do when my kids were younger and when things were really tight, because kids are 18 and 14 and my son drives. So it's not as hectic as I used to watch Chopped. While I was cooking, and I would tell myself, like, what could I cook? And give myself kind of that 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think it was just a fun thing to do with my kids. And because I would be like, go get this from the pantry. And my kid would go, Dad. So that was always just a fun thing for me. I love to dance. For people that know me, I love to have a good time. So like, take me on vacation, have me, I love to dance. I love music. I love good food.
Is Sinaloa where they danced at
Banda.
Banda. What about Quebradita?
That's kind of like 1980s.
Oh, see? Okay.
But yeah, no, it's in that.
It's a realm. Cowboy kind of thing, right? Rancheros kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like regional, Latin music.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Everybody wears a big hat?
big hat, lots of horses dancing, lots of instruments. Like some of the bandas are 16-piece, 18-piece, glittery jackets, the whole thing. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You'll have to invite us into a banda one day.
I will.
So, sometimes I think about how when you just describe your journey and all the wisdom that you've gained and how we learn from each other. And I always think about if I could rewind the clock, would all that wisdom benefit me at 18, and then I think, well, that 18-year-old probably wouldn't even listen to the advice I'm willing to give today. But what advice would you give if there's a young woman that's 18 or even a young man saying, I can relate to Ashley's story. I'm also an immigrant that moved around with my family. And I would want to see myself like her. Even though I'm not going to college, I can still be successful. I can still make a difference in my community. What advice would you give that young person to get there?
So this was the hardest question when you all sent me the questions, I'm like, what am I going to say? Because again, I've had actually a lot of shame about my journey. So whenever people ask me, I'm like, I'm probably the last person you want someone to ask. But when I thought about it, I thought, okay, what worked for me? And like you framed it, what would I tell my own self, potentially? And so I came up with two things. One is more of like a really practical, is really understand where you lack some executive function. And what I mean by that is that for me, time management and writing things down didn't come naturally to me. So I would have an idea and then I was like, I'm going to remember that. And this is like, again, 10, 15 years ago. I mean, it's not recent, but and then I would be like, oh my gosh, I don't remember, or things like that. And it held me back so much. So that's why now people actually make fun of me because I write down so much.
Smart.
And because I had to know myself. So maybe not for somebody else, that's not the thing, but it's like, get to know what's making you trip up. It was making me trip up so much. And then the second thing is, and we've moved away from this too, which is actually really sad, but I also understand people can't do things for free. So it's a real weird balance, but volunteerism. Huge. I feel like people should go out there. I bet you if you didn't get paid and you went anywhere, I bet you somebody would let you try anything. I would assume. Unless you needed a certificate. But I mean, if it was anything if you're like, I want to go and help you for 20 hours a week or 10 or whatever, that's a lot, maybe 5 or whatever. But that's how you, again, kind of see what is the expectation in the workforce? What are their conversations they're having? How do they move? What do I like it here? Do I not like it here? And you get to meet people and there's just so much. So I volunteered a lot because I didn't have the degree. And that was actually the best thing. It was actually weird, though, because when they said the announcement of how many hours, that was like, oh, my gosh, my children are going to need so much therapy. It was a crazy amount. But I don't think you have to do it that extreme. I can be an extremist in certain things. And I just love the work that we do. But I would say volunteer and know what makes you trip up. That is a trainable, but it's just that you're not conscious about it or making intention around it. Great
advice. As we come to the end of the podcast, we always like to give you the opportunity to share with our audience any upcoming events that you have, whether it's with the Lane County Workforce Board or your workforce centers or any of these boards that you volunteer. Is there something that you'd like to share? And we'll put the information on the screen as well for those who watch us on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thank you for the space. There's a lot going on. So I mentioned a little bit Tamar Jackson keynote. Next week, we're going to have our community collaborative industry luncheon, which is a luncheon that our business services arm of the board does every year. It's their second annual,
Nice.
we're doing, but it was sold out last year with Walter Simmons was our keynote. Nice. Lane County loves Walter Simmons, and I saw him looking at
Everybody
Zillow,
does.
and I was like, you're not taking my job, Walter. No. So Walter was our keynote last year. Tamara's our keynote this year, talking about, they do lens of equity. They do collaboration for a cause, like close down the Tacoma Dome. And so just really excited about that and so happy that he's coming. We have the Oregon Employment and Training Association. So if you become a member of the Oregon Association, for $125, you become an automatic NADA member. And so part of that is going to the conference, right? Is one of the offerings of the group, and so that's coming up next month, and our team will be there and people from across the state. And I'm just excited for NOB with everything happening at the at the state level, at the national level. I'm excited to see who gets kind of the seat for the NADA board of directors. And I think we're just always doing things. We're always trying to be involved in community, and again, just trying to align with the momentum and the excitement that people already have around things.
Well, Ashley, it's always a pleasure to see you in person when we see each other at the conferences. And now we're going to see each other more because you're going to be coming at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Workforce Development Council. I'm glad you decided to stop by here during your trip and do the podcast with us.
Thank you.
And we're going to, when we publish it, I hope that you can also, share it with your network as well.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Well, that's it for another episode of the WC Podcast. We hope to see you at a future one. Until then, stay safe. Well, Ashley, thank you for staying over to do our bonus segment called Against the Wall. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. The first section is called Your Favorites. I'm going to give you a category, and you're going to give me your favorite thing in that category. We're going to start with an easy one. What's your favorite food?
My favorite food is ceviche.
What's your favorite beverage to have with that ceviche?
Michelada.
The favorite car you've ever owned?
Oh, a Suzuki Samurai, and I painted it glittery purple.
Your favorite musical group or artist?
Beyonce.
Your favorite movie?
4 Christmases.
Your favorite book?
The Prophet.
Your favorite college sports team?
The Oregon Ducks, y'all? What are you talking about?
Favorite professional sports team?
The Raiders.
Awesome. Wow. Shout out to a Vegas team. So you made it through the first section. Now the second one is called Tough Choices.
Oof.
I'm going to give you 2 things, and you're going to hopefully pick one of them. Are you ready?
Yes.
Vacation or staycation?
Vacation.
When you go to your vacation, would you rather drive there or fly there?
Both.
When you get there, stay in a hotel or an Airbnb?
Hotel.
When you retire one day, will it be in a rural area or in the city?
By water.
Oh. If you had a day all to yourself, would you rather spend it by the ocean or hiking in the mountains?
Ocean.
If you were a superhero, would you rather have the ability to fly or breathe underwater?
Ooh, breathe underwater.
The ability to speak with animals or speak any human foreign language?
I want to talk to my dog, Luna.
Here's where it gets hard.
Okay.
Actions or words?
Actions.
Justice or grace?
Justice.
Awesome. Well, you made it through the second segment. Now the last one is called Finish the Sentence. So I'm going to give you about 90% of the sentence. You're going to finish it for me. You ready?
Okay.
If Ashley could visit any place in the world, it would be?
Chingatera.
The best part about living in Lane County, Oregon is?
It's gorgeous in the summertime.
Ashley's favorite thing about being the executive director for Lane Workforce Partnership is?
Working with my brilliant team and stakeholders and board.
If Ashley could travel back in time, she would travel to?
I would travel to Mexico in 70 something, when it was the golden era of the Mexican starlets.
Wow. 3 words that describe Ashley are?
Energetic, compassionate, hardworking.
I couldn't agree more. Ashley, doing the WC podcast here with us today was?
Amazing.
Well, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.